William Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey is a remarkable statement of his personal philosophy of life and poetry. But perhaps because of his central role in the Romantic movement, it serves as a almost manifesto for the movement as a whole. Romanticism is defined in Tintern Abbey. The full title is kind of a mouthful. Lines composed a few miles above Tintern Abbey on revisiting the banks of the Wye during a tour, July 17th, 1798. That's a mouthful. Very few people can, reference it by all those words. The title is longer than some poems. But what is significant in that is critics will point out to a few things, just to dwell on the title for a second. Critics will point out a few things that the poem itself does not reference the Abbey at all, so it's really not so much about that, just as a location around there. It is dated July 13th, 1798, which might seem unexceptional to the average person. But what is notable there is that that is the exact day before the storming of the Bastille. That is the generally acknowledged beginning of the French Revolution. So that's peculiar. That he's referencing a kind of before the fall, or before the chaos moment. It's very much a poem about refuge from the world. And, well, the French Revolution was a very big worldly event. And he seems to be yearning for a kind of Edenic past. That's just one little point. But it's a wonderful poem. It's a beautiful poem. And it's a remarkable little chunk of philosophy as well, where he imagines himself, or he does return to some place he had visited sometime in the past. It's a little vague, but and he just reflects on what this place means to him. And it's a very sentimental poem in that way. And it's going back somewhere that you haven't been for a long while. What sort of feelings does this tend to evoke? Are you sentimental, nostalgic? Is it bringing back painful memories? All of these things are immediately associative when you get into this situation. But his particular evocation of it is really special. Great beginning. 5 years have passed, 5 summers, with the length of 5 long winters. And again I hear these waters rolling from their mountain springs with a soft inland murmur. Once again do I behold these steep and lofty cliffs that on a wild, secluded scene impress thoughts of a more deep seclusion, and connect the landscape with the quiet of the sky. The day is come when I again repose here under this dark sycamore and view these plots of cottage ground, these orchard tufts, which at this season with their unripe fruits are clad in one green hue and lose themselves mid groves and copses. Once again I see these hedgerows, hardly hedgerows, little lines of sportive wood run wild. These pastoral farms, green to the very door, and wreaths of smoke sent up in silence from among the trees, with some uncertain notice, as might seem of vagrant dwellers in the houseless woods, or of some hermit's cave, where by his fire the hermit sits alone. That's just the opening stanza, and it paints a very distinct picture of a kind of primitive vision of woods, of nature. The only evidence of people there would be a smoke rising. And smoke rising could also be, if this is all seen as allegorical, the smoke could be that little bit of like smokestacks from London. Here it is diminished. It is a single stream of smoke, so you can make of that what you will. The sound of it, and I was trying to punch this in the reading, is very gentle. It's a very smooth iambic pentameter. It sounds like real speech. It's not really hitting a hard rhythm. It's not driving it home. It's very mellifluous. Flow is kind of the point, because it is, as he's writing about going walking by a stream where the River Wye, it's a river in northish, well, sort of east. It's in England, over towards the a little further west of London. But it's supposed to sound, or at least it does sound. I don't know what was going through his head when he wrote it. It does sound somewhat like the flowing of water. Critics have noticed that it has this sort of flowing cadence to it that does not come particularly well punctuated with a lot of, short, breaks. No, there's not a lot of you don't hear a lot of punctuation in this. It's just flowing. The language itself is very simple. There aren't a lot of $5 words in there. There aren't a lot of big words in there. It's all very accessible. This goes to readership to a large degree. We're dealing in a time of great expanding readership, and he is speaking to something much more universal than, say, other poets of the age who are writing for much narrower groups, more intellectual, more educated. Here he's writing to, on a human level, to everybody who can identify with that moment of being alone in the woods where you perhaps spent some time in the past and feel nostalgic about that. And who doesn't have an experience like that, whether it's the woods or or East 42nd Street. It's a sense of, I've been here before. What's changed about it? What's changed about me? That moment. Specifically, again, we have very few images of people. The one evidence that I said of the smokestack, he speculates that as well as perhaps some hermit, a hermit living in the woods. How rustic, how uncivilized. This is all pure romanticism. Hermits, and you're just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the seven dwarves at this point. This is romanticism. From there, he starts to develop the ideas. He set the scene in that first stanza, and now he starts to think about it. These beauteous forms, though through a long absence, have not been to me as is a landscape to a blind man's eye, but oft in lonely rooms and mid the din of towns and cities, I have owed to them, in hours of weariness, sensations sweet, felt in the blood and felt along the heart, and passing even into my purer mind with tranquil restoration. Feelings, too, of unremembered pleasure, such perhaps as have no slight or trivial influence on that best portion of a good man's life, his little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and of love. Nor less, I trust, to them I may have owed another gift, of aspect more sublime, that blessed mood in which the burdens of the mystery, in which the heavy and the weary weight of all this unintelligible world is lightened, that serene and blessed mood in which the affections gently lead us on, until the breath of this corporeal frame, and even the motion of our human blood almost suspended, we are laid asleep in body and become a living soul. while with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. He looks at nature. He has that moment where he starts to think and remember and feel the sensations of the past, the sensations of what he thinks, or the difference between his thinking of the in the past and the thinking he has now. These through long absence have not been to me as a landscape to a blind man's eye. He's seeing into it. He is. He's not just sort of scanning it like, oh yeah, it's, woods. He's interpreting it. He's reading nature the way one would read a book. He is leaning in and saying, all right, now what is going on here? And it is a largely anti-rational function. Look at these words, unremembered pleasure, felt in the blood, sensations, unremembered acts, unintelligible words. It's not about thinking. It's about feeling. And it's a rejection of the Enlightenment. It's a rejection of reason and the normal materialist thought that goes into all of that. And he's saying, no, there's something more there. There's something that we can just feel. He uses this as in moments. He declares right out there that he uses this image, this tripwire into his own subconscious, in moments of despair, through memory. But oft in lonely rooms and mid the din of towns and cities, I have owed to them in hours of weariness sensations sweet. When he is back in the city, when he's back in London and he's dealing with people and headaches and all of the cares and frustrations and worries of ordinary life, he has that image in his mind that he can go to, that he can tap into something more peaceful. It's like a mantra. It's like a meditation. It's much more common in today's world where, oh yeah, okay, meditation. We get that. Clear your mind and, imagine a happy place and all that stuff. He's doing it before anybody in England really knew about that stuff. So he is instructing people that when you are tense, when you are frustrated, when you are, when the world is too much with you, all you have to do is tap into scenes of your past, scenes of joy, scenes of a kind of blessedness, and you can get better. You can discover happiness, and significantly, the happiness is all interior. He is doing this all inside. He's not going out and talking to people and telling them about how, well, I took a walk in the woods once and it really helped me. He's just imagining it himself. He's recalling it himself. It's all a completely interior function. And he is bestowing that same interior sensibility on everything else around him, because in that last line of the stanza, in body become a living soul, while with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. So everything out there has an interior life. This is almost an animist thing. The tree has an interior life. The rock has an interior life. Everything has something in it that is a spark of divinity, let's say. And if we can just tap into our own particular interior divinity, maybe we can see something else. Maybe we can see the ideal in everything. If this be but vain belief, yet oh, how oft in darkness and amid the many shapes of joyless delight, when the fretful stir of unprofitable and the fever of the world have hung upon the beatings of my heart, how oft in spirit have I turned to thee, O Sylvan, why, thou wanderer through the woods, how often has my spirit turned to thee? So he's done this many times. He's been doing this for a while. You get the sense that he has been away from this place for a long time, but it was so special to him that he remembers it, and he has used it, and now he's returning in a kind of gratitude to this particular landscape and saying, yeah, you know, hey buddy, you've gotten me through an awful lot in my life. And now with gleams of half extinguished thought, with many recollections dim and faint, and somewhat of a sad perplexity, the picture of this mind revives again. While here I stand, not only with the sense of present pleasure, but with the pleasing thoughts that in this moment there is life and food for future years. And so I dare to hope, though changed no doubt from what I was when first I came around these hills, when, like a roe, I bounded over the mountains by the sides of the deep rivers and the lonely streams, wherever nature led, more than a man flying from something that he dreads, than one who sought the thing he loves. For nature then, the coarser pleasures of my boyish days and their glad animal movements all gone by, to me was all in all. I cannot paint what then I was. The sounding cataract haunted me like a passion. The tall rock, the mountain, the deep and gloomy woods, their colors and their forms were then to me an appetite, a feeling and a love that had no need of a remoter charm by thought supplied, nor any interest unborrowed from the eye. That time is past, and all its aching joys are now no more, and all its dizzy raptures, not for this faint eye, nor murmur. Other gifts have followed for such loss. I would believe abundant recompense, for I have learned to look on nature, not as in the hour of thoughtless youth, but hearing oftentimes the still sad music of humanity, nor harsh, nor grating, though of ample power to hate, to chasten and subdue. And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime that something far more interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns, and the round ocean and the living air, and the blue sky and in the minds of man, a motion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of all thought, and rolls through all things. Therefore am I still a lover of the meadows and the woods and mountains, and of all that we behold from the green earth, of all the mighty world of eye and ear, both what they half create and what perceive, well pleased to recognize in nature, in the language of the sense, the anchor of my purest thoughts, the nurse, the guide, the guardian of my heart and soul, and all my mortal being. My moral being. Wow. The idea that when he's sitting there, knowing that, okay, for the last several years I've been away, I've been able to imagine this scene, and it's made me feel better. Comes the realization that, well, I'm going to be okay in the future too. All I have to do is tap into this. All I have to do is remember this scene, this emotion, this sensation, and I'll be okay. In this moment, there is life and food for future years. It's a storehouse of divinity, of a sense, a storehouse of poetic life that you can take note of, and then no matter where you are, back in the city, in the middle of everything, and headaches and frustrations and worries, you can just, okay, take a moment and remember that, and you'll be okay. And the value of this lesson he wants to share. Nor perchance, if I were not thus taught, should I the more suffer my genial spirits to decay. For thou art with me here upon the banks of this fair river, thou my dearest friend, my dear, dear friend. And in thy voice I catch the language of my former heart, and read my former pleasures in the shooting lights of thy wild eyes. Oh, yet a little while may I behold in thee what I was once, my dear, dear sister. And this prayer I make, knowing that nature never did betray the heart that loved her. 'Tis her privilege, through all the years of this our life, to lead from joy to joy. For she can so inform the mind that it is within us, so impress the quietness and beauty, and so feed with lofty thoughts that neither evil tongues, nor rash judgments, nor the sneers of selfish men, nor greetings where no kindness is, nor all the dreary intercourse of daily life shall ever prevail against us, or disturb our cheerful faith, that all which we behold is full of blessings. Therefore, let the moon shine on thee in thy solitary walk, and let the misty mountain winds be free to blow against thee, and in after years, when these wild ecstasies shall be matured into a sober pleasure, when thy mind shall be a mansion for all lovely forms, thy memory will be as a dwelling place for all sweet sounds and harmonies. Oh, then if solitude, or fear, or pain, or grief should be thy portion, with what healing thoughts of tender joy wilt thou remember me, and these my exhortations? Nor perchance, if I should be where I no more can hear thy voice, nor catch from thy wild eyes these gleams of past existence, wilt thou then forget that on the banks of this delightful stream we stood together, and that I, so long a worshipper of nature, hither came unwearied in that service, rather say with warmer love, oh, with far deeper zeal of holier love. Nor wilt thou then forget that after many wanderings, many years of absence, these steep woods and lofty cliffs, and this green pastoral landscape were to me more dear, both for themselves and for thy sake. He's writing that last stanza to his sister, Dorothy, who was a notable diarist of the era as well. But he's trying to share in this, which is a bold move for him, because so much of what he writes is about him being alone. But he's trying to share this at this point with his sister and say that, we can remember this together. And when we are separated by time, distance, or perhaps even the grave, you can still remember me because we were here together. And that in this, we become part of the landscape. We become part of the memory. The spirit of the place will incorporate us along with the land, with the stream, with the woods. It's a beautiful image, and it's hopeful. It's a little disingenuous when you read about Wordsworth's relationships with people and all that. And throughout this, you get the sense that anytime he references being around people, it's pejorative. Amidst the din of crowds and cities, it's like, well, people. He doesn't like being around people. He likes the solitude. But he doesn't want solitude to equal loneliness. That's where he uses the word solitude in there, but in quick concert with loneliness. That sense that you are alone. And the point of the poem, I would say, and the point of romanticism writ large, is that you are never alone if you can connect with nature. Nature is this repository for you. And you do that largely through memory. Memory is Wordsworth's thing. He doesn't need to be in nature all the time. He does go back, even in the span of these few stanzas. There are a couple of references to him just, okay, this is great, I'm going back to the city. And he'll go back to London, and yeah, it's those memories of nature, of that sensibility of divine connectedness. I keep using the word divine, and it's not a great word for this, but it's close. There's nothing necessarily Christian about any of this. But Christian doesn't equal divine, but I don't want to give that impression. But through memory, you can connect to something ideal. Through thought, then, you can connect to something ideal. It's a little bit of a challenge. It's the belief that a little bit of a challenge to understand, because, well, thoughts are ideas and ideals are ideas, but the idea of nature is, for Wordsworth, more important than the material nature of it. He doesn't have to actually go into the woods and get bitten by mosquitoes to understand this. He knows that the idea is what's important, because the entire romantic project is about tapping into an idea, an ideal, not the material reality. He plays with this over and over and over again in his work, and the Romantics make it their it's their central core. They're all about rejecting civilization, the refinements of the enlightened urban culture, the Industrial Revolution. All of that stuff was just too coarse and mechanical for them. They wanted something perfect. They wanted something ideal. And that's what you get here. You get that sense that, okay, you can find that if you just stay alive to it and look for it. That's why it's a poetic manifesto as well as a general philosophical one, because he is saying that as a poet you need to keep your tool well toned. You need to constantly remind yourself about the presence of that perfection, that ideal in the world. Even if it's not exactly in the world, you need to be aware of it, you need to be awake to it, and you need to be able to see through everything else in the world to find it. That's what a poet is supposed to do in his idea. That's what Romanticism takes up as its marching orders. That's what Romanticism gives to the world of art.